good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Seven, live from Jerusalem with Rabbi Aaron Dovid Poston, who's been teaching us the wonderful series, The 48 Ways to Wisdom. And today we're in the bonus that the Rosh HaYeshiva, who wrote the course, did. We're in part 49. Now, I loved last week's lesson, was pretty good on making the teacher wise. Found a lot there that we all could use to benefit, and I always try to encourage Noahides to approach the rabbis with the utmost of care and concern and respect and dignity, and make sure they're asking wonderful questions. And I think he reiterated that last week. And I so appreciate Rabbi Poston staying up late in Jerusalem to share the light of Torah with us. So let's just jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing today. Rabbi Poston, you're live on the air. I'm going to turn it over to you. We're at part 49 today.
Shavua Tov, everyone, and I'm glad to be back, Dan, and good to see you. I know you're working so hard outside of whatever you're doing here on the Noahide World Center, but what you're doing for the public,
community,
for the tzibur, Kol HaKavod, as we say. So I'm glad to be back. So we're on number 49 of the 48 ways. You have to ask yourself, what are we doing with 49? And I always just imagined, and I understood the Rosh Hashiva always spoke about the 49th way is called review. You know, he never lets you end anywhere. You know, you always have to work harder and continue somewhere. However, in his recordings, actually there are 50 recordings, and he gave another 2 classes. And he based it on the idea that in the text, even though we have in the actual text itself of the Mishnah, there are only 48 ways, right? There's numbered 1 through 48. However, there are some discrepancies. I kind of alluded to that in the past week or two after mentioning that we have 2 more classes. I'll just give you an example. So like awe and fear. They, you really think of them as the same, and in certain copies they are together, and in certain manuscripts they're separate. Like, for example, he gave over, let's say, humility, we call it nava, and not taking credit, which are also very similar, and he separated them. For example, number 7 and number 29. So in certain manuscripts, certain texts, these ideas were separate and given over, 48 ways. But he wanted to cover everything. He wanted to cover all the different texts and possible, combination scenarios. So he ended up giving over 50 in the book that's over my left shoulder. And I feel that this is the proper way to go, even though I would have loved a little vacation, right, and making a siyum, a party for the completion of the 48 ways. Well, looks like we just have to wait another week or 2. So that's the way it is. So just to understand that when it comes to the oral Torah, which is very different than the written Torah, right? The written Torah, if you have one letter missing, the whole thing is no good, right? It's called pasul, and you have to rewrite it or fix it or put it away, and it cannot be used. When it comes to the written Torah, it's in concrete, right? It's concretized. There's no mistakes. But when it comes to the oral Torah, a lot of it is, as we say, it's oral. And when someone's copying it down, they're not as, let's say, as scrupulous. They obviously should be and need to be. But mistakes do creep in. Now, those mistakes are not, we'll call tragic mistakes, right? Thank God.
Erroneous errors. Yeah.
God promised us that the oral Torah will always remain in your mouths. Okay? So this is like another example how the oral Torah remains, right? The main principles are always going to be given over. Whether there's a small discrepancy of a word here or there, a number system is not the end of the world. So keep that in mind for those who are interested in understanding why we have 50 in a Mishnah. The Mishnah actually says 48. It depends which text you read. There's always going to be 48. His book is the 40 Ways to Wisdom, based on that Mishnah that we discussed in chapter 6, Mishnah 6. So I think that's a very important point before we get started with today. So number 49 is let's say in Hebrew, it's mechavein et shmu'ato. Now you can translate that many different ways, right? Mechavein means to have intent, well, let's leave it at that for now. Et shmu'ato, what you hear. However, also it means what you learn. So he translates it like this. His main idea is to organize your mind. And we're going to go deep into this idea. I saw a few other translations for this. One is pondering what you've learned. Now, pondering what you learned, it really fits in with review, the concept of review very well. Another idea is focus, right? Kavanah, mechaven, to focus on what you heard. I would say that's probably the most literal translation of mechaven et shmu'ato. But what does it mean to focus in on what you learn? He's going to use the concept of organizing your mind. And he's basically telling you that, let's say, he brings an example. Let's say you have a very successful business and you have all kinds of receipts and papers and whatnot. Let's say you're not organized, right? And a very important client comes and he says, I want to order what I ordered last time. I mean, come on. So you're going to start guessing what he ordered? You're going to say, why don't you send me your last slip? It's not very professional, right? You want to be successful. You should at least know where that receipt can be found quite quickly, as quick as possible, in order to fill the order and keep the customer happy, right? If you want to look professional, you say, okay, no worries. We'll get around to it. We'll give you exactly what you ordered the last time. And who knows, whether it's 5 minutes or 5 weeks or 5 months till you find that last paper. Now, it could be even on your computer. I mean, people have to constantly, fix their folders on the computer, organize in a way where you can find things. One of the ideas of a Talmid Chacham, we always think a Talmid Chacham, the sage, means that he has all that information stored. It may be true, and there are people with photographic memory, and I mean, I met these people. I mean, let alone some of the Gedolim. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef was known to have a photographic memory, Moshe Feinstein. But what about us? What about us who lack that ability, right? We might come close to remembering certain things that are, we're enthusiastic about, that we love, that touched our hearts.
Search for divine inspiration, though, yeah?
So I heard this is the definition today, because we're not on the same level. It's not necessarily storing all that information, but knowing how to access it, knowing which file it's under. And I think this fits in very well with organizing your mind. I want to go into my own experience with Rav Noach Weinberg. When I first came, I know one of the first projects, and I'm imagining it actually must have been in the yeshiva probably less than 2 months. And we had, I came in Elul, which is like a month before Rosh Hashanah. And towards the end of Elul, towards the end of Tishrei, which is the following month, we had what we celebrate as Simchat Torah. And what they did at the yeshiva at Eshet Torah was they made an auction. In other words, for the different kibudim, for the different honors of taking out a Torah or reading the Torah at a certain point. In other words, it's a big celebration and there's certain honors that are given. So they auction off the different aliyot, the different readings of the Torah, the different other honorary things that are given out. And basically what you have committed yourself is to memorizing certain things, whether it was the 6 constant mitzvahs, the 48 ways, the 613 commandments, or teaching a certain amount of students. You had a whole year. It was 365 days, or whatever, 354 days, according to the Jewish year. You had a year to finish off the project, whatever you committed yourself to do. How many pages of the Talmud you would learn, or how many Mishnayos you would learn, or how many chapters in the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam, or whatever it was. It was many options to choose from. And I remember I raised my hand and I said, okay, I'm going to commit myself to learning, or let's say memorizing. It was not just learning, but it was memorizing the 613 commandments. It was probably the biggest commitment well, I had a year to do it, but
Wow.
it felt like the biggest commitment I ever made in my life. It probably wasn't, but at the time it certainly felt so. I want to talk about that because we're going to talk about how to organize things. In other words, what is the purpose? What is the need? So I think, when I think of that, I think of going back to Numbers chapter 15, verses 38 through 40, which we say twice a day, minimally. This is the third paragraph of the Shema.
Which verse again, Rabbi? Numbers
In
15?
chapter 15, verse 38 through 40.
Okay.
It's really verse 39, but let's read all three verses.
38 says, Speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them that they shall make for themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and they shall affix a thread of sky blue wool on the fringe of each corner. This shall be fringes for you, and when you see it, you will remember all the commandments of the Lord to perform them. And you shall not wander after your hearts and after your eyes, after which you are going astray, so that you shall remember and perform all my commandments, and you shall be holy to your God.
Now, look, I mean, for those who are not familiar with these verses, these are central, right? It's part of the Shema, which I'm also going to talk about. When we talk about the Shema, we're talking about something that is so essential, right? We say it several times a day, and it's something that we imagine ourselves saying, if God forbid, on our deathbed, right? We imagine ourselves if we're falling out of a plane, or God forbid, a plane is in a tailwind, and there's the pilot comes on and says, prepare for a crash landing, right? Or you're in a parachute, whether you believe the parachute's going to open or not. I think you would still say the Shema at that time. It's so central that God is one. So how many things do we do in Judaism that remind us that God is one, right? So you have the tefillin, which has the paragraphs in it. You have the mezuzah, which has the paragraph in it. There's so many mitzvahs that point towards the idea that to believe in God. So you have so many things going through your mind all the time, and believe it or not, you have to hyper-focus. You have to basically come up with some concept that's a heading, a broad heading, and then there's so many subcategories and so many offshoots and ways to live life. So here you have in these verses, when you see it, you will remember all the commandments. So the Rosh used to, I would say like in a jest, in a little joking fashion, but he was totally serious. And anybody knows his voice. I mean, he was just heavy. Whatever he said was heavy. So he says, what do you think the Torah is telling you? You're going to look at these things and you're going to remember? It doesn't work like that. You have to first learn it, and you have to memorize it. And only then, when you see them and look at them, you'll remember. You can't just expect to look at these strings with the blue, without the blue, with the 5 knots, with the 8 strings, whatever all these things obviously represent, that ultimately bring you to the consciousness, to this realization that there is a God, and he's almighty, and he loves you, and he's in a relationship with you. All these things are very important. Okay, but then there's details. So how do you remember all these details? So this is the idea of what we call simanim. Simanim, I don't really know how to translate it well. It means signs. So one of the lessons we were taught when you're learning a piece of Gemara, on your Gemara, each page, write the 1, 2, 3, or 4 possible subject matters that really moved you, the whole daf that the page is discussing. Try to narrow it down into 1. So each page, when you come across, let's say, Sanhedrin Nun Chet, on page Sanhedrin Nun Chet, what is it talking about, right? So there are obviously, there's mnemonics. We're always using mnemonics, right? Even the we call Reshi Tevos. There's just so many devices, and we're going to talk about these. We're going to talk about different devices you can use in order to remember. Okay, but the first thing I think is committing yourself to working hard in order to get it into your system. Try to ask as many questions, try to understand this, and just to work as hard as possible to begin with. But know the goal is to digest. We're talking about kinyan, right? The whole idea of these are
Well, it's got to be filed properly. Yeah.
Acquire the Torah. So if you don't file them properly, you won't be able to access them. And these are important life missions.
You don't want to have just thoughts bouncing around like a ball,
right,
in your brain. Yeah.
And later on in verse 40, it says, right, what's the point? So that you shall remember and perform all my commandments. Again, so there's twice remembering. So this is a very important point. And I thought that was okay. So now, I just wanted to bring another side point because I always had, and I still do, a desk that's extremely messy. Now, when I worked at I learned for 10 years in the Kollel and Aish Torah, but I also I had a small office, and I dealt with thousands of students at a time. We dealt with trips coming from abroad, from all over the world. Baruch Hashem, we had computers, but we didn't have. I mean, basically, even the computers that we have were constantly being updated, and we had people who worked in the back in the offices who, I guess, called programmers, right? Who helped manipulate, develop the programs according to our needs, according to the organizer's needs. And that was very helpful. But we had, let's say, like 18 classes going on at the same time. I had to organize 18 different teachers. We had to have the keys in the right place. We had to have, markers or whatever they requested. It was overhead projectors, movies, whatever it was, all the different logistics. And even though the computer system seemed to work well, but sometimes it was down. I always had a hard copy. I always double checked the hard copies after I put it in the computer. I printed them off. I had them all because sometimes you can't always see or rely on what the computer did to show you there were conflicts, right? That was the whole idea of this program, to show conflicts. And if the teacher, let's say, is in one part of the Jewish quarter and he had to be in the other part of the Jewish quarter in 0 minutes, it wouldn't work. So we'd have to readjust the schedule. Anyway, again, the whole idea is how can you organize? What are the best ways to organize in your own? Now, just consider, shouldn't we be having, as I'm sure people are told through their lives, to have a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan? Like, what do you want out of life? You're about to go to college. What do you want to do when you finish college, right? And then you're about to take a job. Is there a sense of advancement?
Trajectory. You need trajectory.
Yourself, right? Yeah. Trajectory. Do you see yourself in a different position in how many years, right? Is that going to affect your family? What about your family life? You have 1 child, 2 child. Is the house you're living in big enough? Are you close enough to your in-laws or far from your in-laws? I mean, how close do you want to be to your siblings, right? All these small details are going to be part of, hopefully, your long-range plans, but you have to have them. Organizing your time. I remember in yeshiva, it was so huge. I don't know if they do this in other yeshivas. Time management. Time management was key in Aish Torah. If you're going to learn 15 minutes, let's say Mesilas Yesharim, and then you're going to go to your next subject, and how much time you're going to spend on it, and where do you want to be in a year from now? Is that going to help you reach your goal? These were all very important things. I don't think, I could be very wrong, I don't think most yeshivas deal with those issues of time management, and I think it does have unfortunate repercussions.
Right, they give you a curriculum instead. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just looking through my notes. So we start talking about simanim a little bit. So I actually left on the other side of the room. I don't know if I need to get it, but there's a certain chumash written by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. And what he does, he labels each paragraph. Now, each paragraph in Hebrew, not in English. I mean, he says in English, but I'm talking about the way the chumash is broken into Hebrew paragraphs. So we had a fantastic teacher at Aish Torah. I don't know why I didn't write his name down, but I forget it right now. It'll come to me later. And he taught Simani. It was so important. Whether you're learning the Rambam or whether you're learning Chumash, even the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch, the book of Jewish law, is all broken down into paragraphs with headings, right? Again, how to access that information. So you learned all of Hilchos Shabbos, all the laws of Shabbos, but what about Erev Shabbos? What about Motzi Shabbos? What before Shabbos, after Shabbos? What about the laws of cooking, the laws of Borer, how to dress on Shabbos? I mean, when people come to you and ask you questions, how are you going to answer them? Of course, you're going to reach deep down into your own gut and your own brain and your own seichel to figure out. But you know what? It's always good to have the access, know where to find the answers. So it's no mistake. It's no mistake that the simanim, that's what we call them, simanim in the Shulchan Aruch, are labeled. So this Chumash is very good. The Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan Chumash. I don't know what it's called. Okay, I'm going to go get it. Okay, hold on. I want to show you guys.
So this is just for an example, of organization. I think a lot of what the rabbis teach cyclically with the year is to help us understand how to be more orderly.
It's amazing because even the names of the parshiot, like you just said, I mean, just going through whether it's Breshit, Noach, Lech Lecha, whatever the parshiot, even knowing them, it's knowing Torah. It's knowing how to access, when did Abraham do what he did, at this point in time of his life, so you'll know what parsha it's in, right? So this Chumash is, okay, I believe it's still in print. It's called the Living Torah, okay? That's what it's called. Now, one of the main ideas the Rosh Yeshiva expresses, so you're going to learn a book, or even after you finish the book, there's a very important thing called, drum roll please, the table of contents. It's like, you want to know where things are? Just go to the table of contents. And that's what he does. He lists, each paragraph, what the theme of the paragraph is. Okay? It's just beautiful. I mean, I don't have to express how beautiful something like this would be. The whole Chumash, and I think he does it also for the rest of the Nach, at least for the prophets. I think he also does the Ksuvim, the writings, but this is so you understand the 613 mitzvahs, how important it would be to learn, and you could use the Rambam. There's other books. Like the Eisha Torah put out a book. I actually have that here. I'm looking for it on my shelf. I'd have to get up and access it. They're probably not in print anymore. There it is. Let me just get it. I'm going to go get it. Okay, 1 second.
Yeah, just becoming an organized person can, develops your growth for sure.
Okay, this was put out by Eisha Torah like 100 years ago. I shouldn't say 100. It was 1983. Okay, the last century, 100. So what does it have? It's amazing because it just tells you which mitzvah is which. Now, according to whom? According to the Yad Chazakah, according to the Rambam, according to the Sefer Mitzvahs, and then according to the Chinuch. So you have three different Rishonim who put together a list of the 613 mitzvahs. They're a little bit different because some go according to the order from Genesis all the way to the end of the Deuteronomy in exact order how it appears in the Torah. The Rambam did not do it like that. The Rambam, he put it in
systematic.
Yes, so that's a whole nother thing we have to talk about. Actually, yeah. So that's another idea we're going to talk about, like different methods. Okay, I think I covered everything on my first. Oh, so I just wanted to mention something that a little trick that I did when I was learning Talmud in the beginning. So a lot of it is in Aramaic. I mean, you have the Mishnah, which is mainly biblical Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, let's say, ancient Hebrew, Mishnaic Hebrew, 2,000 years ago. It's not certainly not modern Hebrew. And then you have the Gemara, which is a big mix of a lot of Aramaic with quotes of Mishnah or Bright Diot, which is using Mishnaic Hebrew. Now, that's not easy Hebrew. So this certain edition called the Rubinstein edition actually had the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam on whatever phrases were being highlighted in the Gemara. This printer would take, and I'll tell you the truth, I mean, it's like cheating, right? For a yeshiva guy, it's like cheating, because the Shulchan Aruch and then the Rambam was in, I'm going to call it modern Hebrew. 500 years, 1,000 years ago is much more modern than the Mishnaic and the Gemara Hebrew, or even the Aramaic. But it would be like a tool for me to, first of all, try to understand the words I didn't know, because you can get them from the context of the Rambam or the Shulchan Aruch. But also, the truth is, every Gemara does this. They actually have a little key, very small. You need a magnifying glass sometimes, wherever the Gemara is going to be quoted in the Shulchan Aruch or in the Rambam, it's a little key. It tells you where, which means you have to get up and get another book. But the Rubinstein edition had it at the bottom already in. I don't know if they still are in print, but it was invaluable for me as a
parallel book. Yeah,
as a beginner. But to see take note where it is appearing in the Rambam or in the Shulchan Aruch, because later you will have to go to that. So these are all good ideas. In other words, we're talking about organizing in your mind, right? So this is all. So the Rosh Yeshiva says like this: the human brain can be likened to an extremely sophisticated office. Because we talk about having an office, and if you're not organized, what are you going to do? Well, the brain has constantly new information flowing through it. So you've learned so many important lessons about living, life. So you're talking about fostering relationships, building a marriage, deepening your relationships with God, maintaining business ethics, coping with disappointments. But without a systematic way to organize these ideas, they quickly become a mass of unmanageable ideas. How are you going to access this information in the future without some type of structure? So he's going to go through so many, Baruch Hashem, so many ideas, but he wants to drill it into you first, right? You have to create a mental filing cabinet so that when you hear a new piece of wisdom, you can automatically place it into the correct file, making it accessible for future use. Now, I think this is important.
Wow. Yeah,
the
beautiful.
More, I underline this, the more organized your wisdom is, right? What do we say wisdom is? Power, right? Wisdom is power, right? So guess what? The more power you have, the more power you have to access
ability to function. Yeah.
And use it to help you navigate your way through life, right? Now, if you don't organize your wisdom, you have this inability to find and use the insights that you've accumulated, and it will actually, I have a hard time, it will discourage you and depress you, right? And I mean, today we have Google. Okay, so you want to find something and you can't. But you know what? What you put in is what you're going to get out. If you put in the wrong word, what I don't know what they're called, the
search
choice
engines.
you're looking for, well, whatever search engine you're using, but if you don't put the right words in, you're not going to get out. You're going to spend a lot of time, and time is money, right? So time is valuable, and you never get it back. So having some files in your brain that you basically know are there, but you're having a hard time accessing them. Nevertheless, the fact that you put them in a file, you'll eventually find it. Bezrat Hashem, right? With Hashem's help. Davening. You have to daven. You have to pray for Torah, right? But you have to do the effort. If you don't make the effort, it doesn't matter how long you're going to daven for, right? It doesn't matter how much you pray. Okay? So you have to make all these efforts. And putting them into categories, filing them. So going through whatever pages, going back to the beginning and looking at the table of contents, reviewing what you've learned, knowing where they're located, but putting little simanim for yourself at the top of each page. Or, I I don't even want to show you the color coding I use. It's unbelievable. But anyway, so what about this idea of you'll become discouraged and depressed, and you'll even dampen your desire to learn and grow? What are you going to say? You're going to say like this: I've forgotten so many fantastic ideas in the past. What's the point in trying to learn new ones? Right? I'll probably just forget those as well. Well, guess what? Feel the pain of a chaotic, fragmented mind in order to motivate yourself to organize your ideas. Right? When you're pained over the fact that you know it and you can't access it, should bother you.
Where did I put that?
Yeah. And hopefully that will serve in the future to motivate yourself to file things better. Now, a key to organizing this wisdom is to develop a framework, misgeret, right? Some kind of framework that doesn't turn your mind into a bureaucracy, right? There's a lot of ways. Here's examples, right? Use what we call a logical flow, right? You learn a piece of Gemara, you learn the sugya, say it. We call shakla v'taria, the give and take. Say it over. You know that these rabbis are wise, and they went through, one idea, they went a little bit on a tangent, then they came back to the main idea. Anybody that's, learned a little piece of wisdom from the rabbis understand this idea. Well, go through it, repeat it, see if there's some logic.
You got to chew it up and digest it, sure.
Why did it go on this seemingly irrelevant tangent? And then you'll find after you review it, there actually was a good reason. And it was accessing another file, right? Another important file that is put away for a rainy day, let's say, but you need to know it. Yeah. Here he just says, when you pick up a book, first read through the table of contents and get a sense of the overall structure. Try to see if there's structure, right? Take a few minutes to imagine what will be discussed in each chapter and how the chapters all connect to form one whole, right? And the Torah itself has quite a number of table of contents, right? The classical system is how the 613 mitzvahs are organized. You have the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, for example, and he organizes them into 14 volumes with subsets of 83 sections. And this happens to be one of the greatest ways to memorize the entire oral Torah. And believe me, there are so many young men sitting in Eshet Torah memorizing the Rambam. The Rambam is available in most yeshivas. I won't deny that. But to sit and learn the Rambam from cover to cover, right, in 14 volumes, there's not a lot of yeshivas doing that. And Eshet Torah had always pushed for that. What's the value in memorizing the 613 commandments, mitzvahs? It gives you 613 file folders in which to place all new wisdom. I'll tell you, if someone would ask me, what was the greatest advantage to learning or memorizing the 613 commandments? So even though I did learn them in depth and memorize them, I'm going to say superficially, meaning at one time I could actually repeat them in order, all 613. I don't know if I could do that today, but what I can do is access the files. Somebody could tell me, and people do, oh yeah, this is a mitzvah from the Torah. And I would say, I don't think so. I know them all, and that ain't one of them. Maybe it's a rabbinic, maybe it's a minhag, maybe it's in Kabbalah, but it's not one of the 613 mitzvahs. Or vice versa, to tell me it's only rabbinic. You say, only rabbinic? Are you kidding me? It's actually in the Torah, okay? Because one of the commandments is not to add or subtract. So you have to know which is from the Torah and which is not. So knowing all 613 is quite a valuable lesson. Here he mentions this idea I mentioned by the Shema, by the Tefillin, by the Mezuzah. He says, listen, if you learn one new concept that brings to life the concept of Yichud Hashem, knowing that God is one, you can file it under a particular mitzvah. One of the mitzvahs is to know that God is one, right? Or if you discover a new insight into helping people less fortunate than you, then you file that under charity, right? Giving tzedakah. So you know where to file these things when you come across them. Here's an idea, as we already spoke about. Some people give each section of the Torah a name, a siman. I mean, siman doesn't mean name. It's more like a sign, but okay. To summarize its essence. So you make your own name, something that you can relate to. And then you memorize the names of the chapters in the Talmud. Just knowing the chapters, when you're, right, a certain concept is discussed in that chapter. So you're already way ahead of the ball. So you can, you ever come across that idea, you already know it's in chapter 2 of Bava Metzia, right, or whatever it is.
Beautiful. Yeah. I heard a description of Psalms in the last week and how they're broken down, how David went through what he went through, and it kind of put it into chunks like that.
There are so many, I'd say editions of Psalms that have tables of contents that discuss the themes of each of the different 150 chapters. Okay, one of the key methods of organizing your wisdom is to extract the fundamental principle underlying a topic. This is much easier to memorize than a bunch of details, right? So once you hear that topic, if you really delve deeply into that subject matter, and within your own mind you organize it as best you can, so at least reviewing the topic, periodically and going into the details is a great way to remember them later on. Yeah, but you just
always try to get the underlying fundamental, especially this series you've been teaching us, these 48 ways to wisdom. I encourage everybody to go back, check each and every one of these classes out again to just find that underlying fundamental, even though it's right there at the beginning of the chapter when you give the title. Try to find that in the lesson, and boom, it'll stick with you a lot better.
I'll give you an example. Tosfos themselves. Tosfos is a group of many rabbis from France, Germany, England, right after Rashi, and so you're talking about like almost 1,000 years ago, a little short of 1,000 years ago. And what he does is they find what you would almost say is contradictions within the oral law, or problems, right? When you have like one idea, how does that jive with the entire, voluminous oral Torah? If you have this principle, doesn't it seem to contradict that? And then it's always resolving. It's always trying to explain this in a different way. That's why it's not a problem. So if you ever notice two great rabbis sitting and talking, he'll just say, that Tosfos over there, that resolves the problem. Or, right, just to know where again, we're talking about organizing your mind, to delve deeply into things and categorizing things and putting them into files. And that's exactly what Tosfos does. All he has to do is mention one principle or one page or one word from a page out of the 7,000 pages, and the person who's having this discussion already knows the topic being discussed and understands how that one word relates to a topic that resolves the whole issue. This is amazing. Okay. Now there's other methods. Flashcards. We used a lot of flashcards when trying to memorize anything. 613 commandments. I certainly used flashcards. I use flashcards just even for the alphabet, just to remember what we call the alphabet in Hebrew, the alphabet, the aleph-bet. These are very good ideas. And have a friend test you, right? So whenever you come across a new piece of information, write it on a card. This system is easy to computerize. You can even set up a hyperlinked network of information. The main thing is to pick up a system, whatever works for you, and to build your own wisdom database around it. Try this method in whatever subject you learn. It's worth the investment because building a system will upgrade your learning for the rest of your life. Remember, you're constantly picking up new information. You're spending time and money to acquire knowledge. If it's worth learning, then it's certainly worth keeping and using. So here's an idea he brings down. Before beginning any important project, open a new file folder to store information, whether it's going to be money management or Jewish wisdom or parenting. Be diligent in organizing your information. When you come across a good article or take notes on an insightful class, don't just stuff it in a drawer somewhere. For example, if you're starting a family, gather, organize any wisdom you would have to acquire in order to raise children, because learning on the job may be too late. At least skim through it in the beginning, know it's important information, know where to access it. The most important thing is taking a few minutes to organize your laptop or your computer and putting, as you go through, I do it a lot. I send myself articles and I put something in the subject. I send it by email to myself, and I put something in the subject matter that, like a key, that I'll remember. Because sometimes you can't find that same article. But guess what? Many times I've searched my own emails, couldn't find it, but I at least remembered what I used then to search for the article, and it comes up. But that's the idea. Okay, now we're going to get into memory devices, right? Now we know that memorization is a tremendously powerful way to truly own an idea. The whole idea is kinyan Torah, making an acquisition. It puts the concept or information into your pocket, making it immediately accessible at your mental fingertips. There's several ways to memorize an idea. One, to repeat it over and over again, or memorizing by rote, or as we discussed already, unraveling the logical flow. Now, to discerning logical flow is usually more effective for long-term retention. Take, for example, a medical student who needs to memorize names of all the bones in the human body. So there's different ways. You can learn it alphabetically, so he should memorize it alphabetically. But that is not the flow. The flow would be, from head to toe.
Right. Connection
and we
with the body.
used to have a song when we were growing up. I mean, I wish I remembered it, but
one bone's connected to the other bone.
There you go. Right, all the way up to the hip. Okay, after that you get lost, but it's easy enough from the toe to the hip, right? And so there's two ways. You can memorize them, which maybe because they have, what do they call them? Greek names or Latin names. They're not so easy to remember. I mean, obviously, if you're studying to be a medical student, you have to remember them, right? You would look silly if you said, "Oh yeah, it's the funny bone." No, it's
the prescriptions they have to write, the names of some of those things. Ugh. Right. Maybe that's why they scribble. They learn to scribble.
Right. Maybe that makes sense. Okay, so you can use the logical way or the what do you call it? The alphabetical way. So another way is called mnemonic devices, right? Try to extract the essence of an idea, summarize it in a catchphrase that can be easily memorized. This way, rather than struggling to recall the information from scratch, you'll be able to retrieve the entire idea under your catchphrase. Right, here's some other effective memory techniques. Assign a 1 or 2 word description to each idea. 2, take the first letter of each concept and make a funny acronym out of the letters. It works. Number 3, create an imaginary scene or story in which the key concepts all appear together. Now, the more outrageous the scene, the easier it is to recall. Number 4, put the ideas into a song. The tune will enable you to remember a series of words. Now, I mentioned before, when you see people learning Talmud and Gemara, right? So what happens is, a lot of times, they will put it into a sing-song. This is how, right? They'll remember it. Okay, that's one way that we have, let's say, developed this way of memorization. Another way is it's unbelievable. The way the Gemara works is, this rabbi said in the name of that rabbi who was walking with that rabbi at the time. Why do you need to know all that? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One of it is the integrity. There's always going to be consistency in what rabbi said what. that if we find in the Talmud, this rabbi said this, and the same rabbi said the opposite somewhere else, we have a problem, right? There has to be an integrity and a consistency, but more than that. How often, it's like this rabbi was arguing with that rabbi. This rabbi was walking on the way with this rabbi. And then there are stories where they're crossing a river, they're crossing a bridge, they're sitting in front of these rabbis. There's always a story behind every single rabbi, no matter what he says throughout the entire Talmud. And that's a great way to remember, which I think that they knew, and they instilled that into the story, into the storyline.
Beautiful, yeah.
People typically have a big mental block to memorizing anything. But once you get going, it can become fun and easy. To begin, he suggests learning the names of the 48 ways by heart and review them as you walk down the street. Okay, now, I'm going to say this is the power of the mind. When you say to somebody, don't forget this, I don't think that's useful. If you say, please remember this, I think it's much more useful. So he claims that we have two buttons in our head. One is the remember button, one is the forget button. I mean, just think about it. If I tell you don't forget, so you hear the word forget, you hear it. And I'm not saying that causes you to forget, but it's likely to, right? But if I tell you to remember, there's a good chance that you'll remember to remember because I told you to remember, right? It's a good word to remember. Okay, anyway. So he says, evaluate and eliminate. If knowledge is power, then forgetting is the ultimate weakness. We don't want to forget.
Wow.
We have two little buttons between our shoulders. First of all, the Torah even says so many times, one of the 613 commandments is it's forbidden to do anything to cause yourself to forget the Torah. You're not allowed to forget it. Anyway, we have two little buttons between our shoulders. One is the remember button, and one is the forget button. Okay, did you ever get a phone number from, I don't know, some millionaire or let's talk guys here, right? Some attractive woman or a woman from a very successful guy she wants to date? It doesn't matter if it's 35 numbers. She'll remember it, and he'll remember it, right? The millionaire says, yeah, come, I'll have coffee with you, and I'll share with you some wisdom. You're not going to forget that number because you're going to remember it, right? So how many times do we get a phone number? Yeah, I'll remember it. We don't remember it, right? It slips out of your mind. That's because you press the forget button. But we could press the remember button, right, when we want to. So when you hear a valuable piece of wisdom, decide, this is important. I want to remember it. I'm going to keep it. You have the power. Just press the button. Press the remember button, okay?
Like
I think on cell phones they have recall, right? You can recall, right? Now, if you can't process new information on the spot, then at least at the end of each day, review the main things you've learned. For example, if you heard a good lecture, verbalize the main points and file away what you found valuable. Furthermore, set aside time for reviewing. That's why I understand. This whole point is really about reviewing. If you don't review, you're never going to be able to make that full kinyan. Review what you've learned. It's easy to forget things when you're not dealing with them on a daily basis. So reviewing not only helps you remember the information, but it's going to help reveal those connections between ideas that you didn't see in the beginning, and this is also going to help your flow, right? We say always, you have to, when you say review, you have to go over things 4 times before you even make the claim, I learned it once. I think I've said that before. At every page of Talmud has, I'll just have to show you. So let's say the Talmud, the actual Gemara is here. Let me just turn this a little bit like this. This is the Talmud that's in the middle. And then you have Rashi's on the inside, Tosfos is on the outside. Okay? This of the middle. Now you see there's 4 lines on top before it gets shorter, thinned out. There's always 4 lines. Every one of the 7,000 pages of the Talmud has the top 4 lines wide, and then they thin out. And it's told to me, this is a reminder. You have to learn everything 4 times before you even consider have learned it once. And that's not even going into the deeper ideas of pardes, of pshat, remez, drush, and sod, which those who are listening understand what I'm talking about. These are very important ideas. Don't assume you learned anything after hearing it or looking it over just once. And
even taking notes helps retain more.
Yeah. A crucial part of organizing your mind, there's all kinds of ways to do it, right? So one of the ideas is just, is this something between me and me? Is this something between me and God? Is this something between me and others? There's always categories to put. It's a positive mitzvah, it's a negative mitzvah, right? When I say positive and negative, no mitzvahs are negative. We mean, are they do's or they don'ts, right? Whatever I'm learning, what category is this going to fit into? So, man, these are so important. My life, right? What I do between me and God, what I do between me and myself, what I do between me and others. And I should know what category they fit into, right? Mm-hmm. So ask yourself, let's say, for example, if it's between me and myself, what is the purpose of life? What are my goals and dreams? How did I arrive at them? What are my talents? What are my virtues? What do I ultimately want out of life? So these are things to ask yourself constantly with any piece of information you hear, but what are you going to do with it? What about between me and others, right? What do I know about relationships with friends, parents, colleagues, society? What causes me to struggle in relationships? How often do we have, whether it's communication, whether it's misunderstanding, there's so much, emotions that are involved in relationships. Mm-hmm. What went wrong? Why did I feel this way after that conversation? Was it me? Go over these ideas, because if you don't, you'll never improve yourself or the relationship. What do others like most about me? I mean, you have to know who you are in your relationship with others. And what about between you and Hashem, your relationship? What do I know about truth? What do I know about kindness? Why was this world created? What are my God-given rights and what are my obligations? I mean, I see now all over the world, people are asking themselves these questions. So as you're going through life, file the information you're hearing. So he says and suggests, now formulate your answers into a set of life plans. Create a 1-week plan, a 1-month plan, a 1-year plan. And then think about your 5-year goals and how they're going to lead you to accomplish your lifetime objectives. What do you want on your tombstone? And this is like, who wants to answer that? This is a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful question, and it's a difficult one. It helps clarify what you hold most important in your life. Be mindful of your overreaching goals and keep your priorities straight. Okay, so that's it for today. I'm going to look over I did have some additional notes. They're quite...
Well, Rabbi, just beautiful when you said it's worth the investment. I think people need to know that they are worth the investment. You are worth the investment, and invested in yourselves. Everything he's talking about today, I love how you said if knowledge is power, forgetting is the ultimate weakness. And how often many I see B'nai Noach that sit into so many classes, how much are they really absorbing, and then how much are they taking to the streets when they're actually out there living in this world? I mean, we have the opportunity to make this world a better place if we put into practice the beauty of the Torah as it's shared. And if you don't remember it, and the opportunity pops up and you're like, I remember there was a lesson from so-and-so, and you don't have it filed anywhere. You're standing there stumbling and mumbling, and you're looking for the right answer. And I love how you said, even at the end of the day, if you had a good class, think about it. I mean, it should be part of your nightly prayer. I mean, before you go to bed, reorganize what you had. It'll stick with you better that way for sure. And I love that discern logical flow in what you're getting into. Understand the underlying fundamental, and it just makes all the difference. And you are worth asking yourself these questions.
I just want to close with one verse from Proverbs. It's actually verse 21. It's Mishle. It's Proverbs chapter 4. It's really verse 21, but if you read 20 through 22, you'll get a better feel for the verse.
All right. 20 says, My son, hearken to my words, incline your ear to my sayings. 21, let them not depart from your eyes, guard them within your heart. 22, for they are life for those who find them, and for all his flesh a healing.
Yeah, you understand. I mean, this is King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, right? So when it begins, my son, hearken to my words. Imagine Hashem is giving us his Torah, his manual for life. This is so valuable. And he's telling you, incline your ears, right? Listen well, right? Listen well. Let them not depart from your eyes, me'enecha, right? They shouldn't leave your eyes, meaning, I'm going to say, it means review. Constantly review. Don't let them depart from your eyes. Try to imagine what is being spoken to you, the value of it, the meaning behind it. But then the next statement says, guard them within your heart. I mean, it has to enter your heart. And you want to guard them. I'm going to again use the word review. I mean, what does it mean? Shamrein betoch levavecha, right? To really guard them. And why? Obviously, because they're valuable. For they are life for those who find them, and for all his healing. I think that really sums it up. Review, review, review. You couldn't do more than that. But again, the idea would be to, and I'm going to just quote again the titles that we gave for this, so you can choose which one is most fitting. I think focus on what you heard is the most literal translation. Pondering what you have learned, I understand that, but the Rosh Yeshiva says organizing your mind. He puts it all down to that point, and that makes a lot of sense. And so with that we finished number 49, and next week we have number 50. So B'ezrat Hashem.
Yeah, there's nothing more difficult than being fragmented in your thoughts. And if you want to be a whole person out there, one able to do well, you've got to be organized in your thoughts. And I think what the rabbi shared with us today gives us the tools, the empowerment, enablement to get the task before us done. And hopefully those of you listening will take it to heart. I'm so enjoying this series, but I know we're winding down. So, Rabbi, Hashem willing, are we going to do a part 50 next week?
B'ezrat Hashem, I just don't know if I got that point across. I wasn't trying to brag about the work I did on the computer when I was running all these programs. The point was that no matter how much you try, and you have to make the effort, Hashem will be there to help you, but you have to make the effort. They say about geniuses, your table could be a mess. I tell my wife, people, don't touch it. I know exactly where it is, right? It looks like a mess. That's the whole point, right? These geniuses.
Well, you see the order in the chaos.
I'm not saying I'm a genius, but to find exactly what you're looking for, that's the key, right? And sometimes you have to be what's called redundant. There are these ideas even in computing and.
Well, Rabbi, I think it was this lesson. I think that really helped me. If you recall, did you note my work I did with the magnetic anomalies, trying to validate a global flood? The point is, working with these magnetic anomalies, I began to systematically organize them based on some thinking that came, I think, out of this series. And basically, I took all the homogeneous spatial mixing, which is just random colors, and I separated them with, Photoshop algorithm so that all the colors are separate. And, you can look at each one individually as an overlay, and all of a sudden you can see distinct motion in such potential organization. And my point is that when you're looking for something, patterns emerge, and I do a lot of CG animation, and one of the most powerful tools used in Adobe After Effects is their fractal fractal. What do they call it? Yeah, fractal geometry interface. Basically, it just starts to you can motion fractal imagery, and when you understand the way the pattern flows and how similar it is to the organics in nature, you can begin to ponder just the profound notion that Hashem has woven everything together in such a way that is so profound. I think that the root of Torah is just so beautiful and so useful, and I just hope that the B'nai Noach. My friend Ashley G out there in California, Rabbi, she says, many thanks for your time and wisdom, Rabbi Poston. I'm glad to see several people that keep coming back to this course week in and week out. It's been quite a journey. So Hashem willing, we're on for part 50 next week.
There's Hashem, for sure.
All right. Well, Rabbi, thank you so much again. Today's a beautiful class. Got right to the point. It's something for us all put into practice. You are worth the investment, folks. So please do it, and you'll see changes in your life, especially when you start to make a plan where you want to be in a year, 2 years, 5 years, like the rabbi suggested, and then monitor your path towards that. Break it down into chunks. Where do I want to be? How far do I got to go this month to get towards that? And in 6 months and in 1 year, all of a sudden you'll see leaps and bounds. Don't be afraid to tackle some things that seem like huge tasks. If you start to do them bite-sized, you'll get through them. And life will just be much more fulfilling for sure. So thank you for that beautiful lesson today, Rabbi. You said it straightforward and very well. And so we're going to sign out for today, folks. Hashem willing, we'll be back next week with the final class of this series, part 50. So until then, have a wonderful, wonderful day.